Hello, dear friends. In our today's program, we shall again talk about what is innermost for every person who follows the spiritual path and strives to learn the truth. I'd like to express my sincerest respect to our guest, and I'm happy to tell you that in our program today we will be talking to Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Greetings, Igor Mikhailovich. Igor Mikhailovich, in the previous programs you repeatedly said that people need to stop quarreling and to simply start respecting each other. That the system disunites while people unite internally, spiritually. And it's interesting that while preparing for the program, I found plenty of information on how people in various religions express respect to each other in different ways. For example, in Hindu tradition, there is such a practice that when people meet each other, they greet one another using the word namaste, which means I express respect to the spiritual in you, to your Atman. So people, even when meeting each other, used to see and communicate with each other in spirit, like a spirit with a spirit. And this has been preserved until today, hasn't it?
It's an imitation.
It's all an imitation.
An imitation of those who, in the past, let's say, really felt and understood this, and they greeted each other without words. And when they were asked why they were doing so, they explained that they greeted one spiritual nature without words, while with words we greet each other's consciousness.
So nowadays people have lost all this. That is, they say that they greet each other as spiritual, but don't really feel that.
It's good that they at least say this.
So everything has simply boiled down to pompous words, right? But they don't feel.
I'll put it simply, if people felt the spiritual nature at least in themselves, they would naturally realize that others also have it. Then people wouldn't say a single bad word to each other, not to mention doing anything bad to anyone. They wouldn't be able to lift their hand for that.
If they really saw that in front of them, saw the spiritual in each other.
Certainly.
A spiritual being.
First of all, if they felt that they are spiritual beings themselves, then it is clear that others are also spiritual beings, and not just material. Unfortunately, nowadays, the first nature, the material one, predominates in people. Therefore, they live by the laws of matter.
So how can a person simply realize during the day that he is a spirit and see a spirit in another person?
Well, a person should first of all realize that he is not quite matter and has a spiritual nature as well. Then both during the day and during sleep, he will be spiritual.
During sleep?
And what's the difference? If we take the work of consciousness, there are surely phases of awakening, falling asleep. But if we consider the actual process, consciousness starts dominating personality at the moment of awakening, and then the dream phase takes place. It's when such a connection occurs, so to say. Yet when a person is in deep sleep, this connection takes place and personality gains freedom, and it can stay with no influence of consciousness for a certain while. And a person doesn't remember this state. Why doesn't he remember? Because consciousness is switched off, disconnected, although personality cannot sleep. Whereas if a person is aware of himself as a spiritual being and begins to feel, let's say, that he isn't just an animal, but is a part of something greater and boundless, to put it carefully, then he can control sleep and he can control everything. In other words, he doesn't submit to consciousness as such. It's consciousness that submits to him. Although it remains as lazy as before, it is similar to an animal, a bear, you know. If you give it a sugar, it rides a bicycle or dances. The same is here, you give it sugar, that is, invest the power of attention, and it learns something, reads, does something, serves the body. or satisfies other needs. Yet, if you don't give it sugar, it immediately gets angry, starts raising a rumpus, or something else. But again, when you control this process, you can easily train it, exactly by investing attention, like a bear is trained. By means of sugar or something yummy, it becomes obedient and the like. Why have I compared it to a bear? Those who engage in animal training know that the most dangerous animal is a bear. No matter how it fawns upon or plays with you, it can attack at any moment, without any warning at that, just as consciousness can. Should you relax a little bit? And that's it. But this doesn't mean that you should be tense. Quite the contrary. You should live by the other world and be relaxed, right? Whereas, when you strain yourself and start worrying, what does this mean?
That you are dominated by consciousness, that you give attention to the other side.
It's like in prayer or meditation, no matter what a person practices, or rather in spiritual practice, to put it more correctly. Once you've paid attention to any thought, you are already in matter. You've already lost connection with the spiritual world. Many people face this on the spiritual path, regardless of what they practice, which religion they belong to, or something else. As we already said, the spiritual path is actually one. It's just that there are numerous ways to it.
Igor Mikhailovich, you've just said regarding consciousness that people are controlled by consciousness, but they can change the situation and consciousness can serve them. How can people realize at all whether they are now controlled by consciousness?
Right now? Well, if now they hear only our words, this means they are controlled by consciousness. This is easy.
There is another interesting point when consciousness questions people who follow the spiritual path. So, how is it going? And what are your results? It offers them to evaluate what stage they are at.
No, most often it even says, you won't succeed, there is no spiritual path, you're wasting your time, and so on. You're totally, absolutely unable to learn, and you're sitting idle just as before. Why so? Because consciousness judges by itself. The most interesting thing is that it doesn't lie. We already mentioned that for consciousness, as a part of matter, the road to heaven is closed, speaking the language of Christianity. Naturally, consciousness doesn't perceive what the spiritual world is, and it is absurd for it. And if a person performs any spiritual practice through consciousness, no matter whether it's a prayer or ritual or something else, this means he is just standing idle, at the best.
So, in order to follow the spiritual path, a person needs to live by feelings and don't enter into any dialogues with consciousness, right?
This won't be possible. The only way to communicate with the three-dimensional world, with our world, is through consciousness. Thus, everything turns into chaos without it.
But it won't tell about the spiritual.
Consciousness about the spiritual, certainly not. Similarly, fish cannot talk about the beauty of the bird's-eye view of nature, can it? The bird's-eye view is inaccessible for fish, because it's underwater. It cannot see how beautiful mountains are from above. It sees them from below only, from afar at that.
Igor Mikhailovich, people don't understand what the true life is, and what the meaning of life is in general. That is, the system as if suggests some shallow meanings to people to choose from these meanings.
This is a good question, in fact. Many people, when they say life, life, after all, life is perceived by consciousness as life here. And in order for everything to be fine with them, many people lay claims, even to God, I would say, in their prayers and appeals. I need this or that, and they suggest a whole list of what God must do for them, and then they would follow Him. Thus, if God exists, He is obliged, He owes them already. He must improve their life, but they don't have to change anything in their life, just as they live by the material world, with material values. That's how everything must remain for them. They should only acquire more power and more material possessions, while everything that consciousness wants and desires. Yet again, why does it desire? It's again an illusion, it's a lie. Consciousness tells a person, well, I'm taking this as an example, a car, okay? I want a car, this one, exactly a car like this. The person works hard, consciousness forces him to achieve it by hook or by crook. The person buys a car. He gets inside. For as long as his neighbor is looking, he is satisfied. But once the neighbor has turned away, that's it.
So the notion of happiness for people is when you are envied and you can boast while being in the system, right?
It's the law of matter. You cannot do anything about it. Again, why do people consider other people who are more successful in their opinion to be happier? Envy. They provoke envy in others. And they are already happy, but when they envy someone, they feel sad.
Because there is someone who is better than you are by the system standards.
Of course, yet when a person already lives by the spiritual world, he's aware of all this, and it's ridiculous for him. If there is a car, it's good. If there is no car, your body will walk on foot. What's the difference? It's faster with a car, it's worse without a car. If you have an opportunity to drive a decent car, well, you will drive a decent car. It's not that important. The most important thing is that you understand very well that nothing belongs to you in this world. Even the body which you use is temporary. It's the same as a shirt. Yes, it seems to be my shirt, yet is it really mine? I'm just temporarily using it.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is also an interesting point about how the system acts. It offers a person to believe that he supposedly possesses something. Moreover, there are not only sort of material things.
The system not just forces a person to believe that he possesses something, but sometimes it even gives such opportunities or demonstrates that a person has some metaphysical abilities. And note, even the most zealous atheists are always proud and often tell how they have predicted something, warned somebody, known something in advance and so on. And they boast about all this. You see, because literally all people are disposed to mysticism owing to their consciousness. They are inclined to a desire to possess secret knowledge. Well, secret knowledge means secret power. You see over others, well, a fight for power, nothing interesting. Everything is like always in matter.
You said that everything is mirrored. If we turn it to the other side, what will it be in the spiritual sense?
Well, if we turn it to the spiritual side, then a person who achieves understanding of what the spiritual world is, let's say, who is in close contact with that world, he really possesses these abilities, but he never uses them, because he knows that they are not his, and he doesn't need them. There is just no point in that. After all, any changes, even in the location of any molecule in this world, cause a chain reaction and can influence people's choice. Well, this is unacceptable. People should be free, should choose and decide themselves how they are to live, whether to fight with each other or to make peace. It's their own choice. What predominates inside them is what they spill outside.
So this is just a projection. You see the external world the way you are inside.
No, not quite so. Owing to consciousness, every person feels himself good, outstanding, and special inside. As a matter of fact, every person is good. Believe me, all people are good. There are no bad people. It's consciousness that makes them bad. It tells them totally opposite things, that everyone is bad, they don't understand, forced to desire something, to commit crimes, to deceive, to be angry. Again, it infects with that very anger. Let's take a simple example. Once in a program, we've already said that when a good deed causes a good chain reaction, it immediately abates, while a bad thing continues for a long time. Let's take a commonplace situation on the road. When you drive and somebody lets you pass, okay? For instance, you have stopped at a crossroad waiting, and a good man stops and lets you pass. You keep driving. If someone is waiting at the next crossroad, you will certainly let him pass. But if you drive for 10 minutes, in 10 minutes you pass by someone who is waiting, and you no longer have any desire to let him pass, you've already forgotten the good deed done to you by the other man. Whereas if someone cuts in front of you, you'll be foul-mouthed all day long. Why? Because he is such a scoundrel. He dared cut in front of you on the road, behaving in an uncultured way. And if someone insults you, you'll be arguing with yourself for a week. Well, we already discussed actors on the stage. These are the pictures which they demonstrate. What for? Because when they provoke an acute emotion in you, you invest attention in it. And the brighter the picture, the more attention is invested. Well, this is funding for the actors. Well, we've already talked about this, so everything is simple.
The point is that people unfold this scenario. Sometimes everything is indeed empty, but after a while, when replaying it...
There is nothing empty. We have already mentioned that there is nothing empty, and even empty thoughts are not empty. In fact, there is no difference whether you play a movie in your thoughts or this movie is played in your life. This is still the same actors, and they are telling you the same things, you see. Personality is actually in deep darkness until it gains spiritual vision and spiritual hearing. There is such an expression, it is nice, when it sees the reality, but until it possesses this, it's like a child, sitting in an auditorium and listening to everything it is told. Nothing more than that, so there is nothing empty. Even those thoughts which people play in their heads all day long, they seem to be fantasizing on some totally distant subjects, imagining themselves a hero or someone else, a winner in an argument. They replay various scenes that haven't taken place in reality, and they continue playing them. They often go back to the same subject that once attracted much of their attention. Yet why does this happen? Because all this takes away people's attention and time. It simply eats. It guzzles life, the real life of a human.
So the most important thing for the system is
Simply to eat.
simply to
No
eat.
morality, no values. Human life is absolutely needless for the system. It doesn't care if you're alive or dead. You will feed it anyway. While you are running around and existing here, you can give it more energy. But when you're dead, you will feed it as well. So it's not important for it.
With everything that the system offers, you won't enter the spiritual world with it, will you?
Well, naturally, we talked a lot about this because the system is the enemy of everything spiritual. It is exactly the one who is called the Antichrist, Satan, the devil, whatever. Naturally, it's an antipode of the spiritual world.
So you cannot enter the gate with such material suitcases.
Yes, the gate is too narrow. By the way, regarding the work of consciousness, why does this happen? Unfortunately, there are only few people, mostly those who study neurophysiology, psychology or psychiatry. They sometimes ponder on why and how we think, while others don't think about this at all. Unfortunately, people miss the most important and necessary. We said many times, it's necessary to control thoughts, to watch, to observe. Yet when a person perceives this through consciousness and has no inner need, no inner intention to study it all, meaning to become more mature and to acquire such skill, they turn a deaf ear to all this. Again, why? Because they listen with their earthly ears, not spiritual ones, while their spiritual ears are covered. Actors have covered their ears and whisper. That's why they don't hear others. Unfortunately, they don't understand how our consciousness operates, but if a person calms down and simply observes what consciousness offers, what skills, and this is really interesting. Let's conduct a little experiment. This has already become sort of our rule. Imagine how you are writing the word cow, okay? Simply cow. Just imagine you have written cow, and now look how your thoughts and associations are unfolding. A cow muzzle appears in front of your face, various animated cows and pictures arise. A can of condensed milk with a cow label, right? A chocolate bar with a cow or something else, and various interpretations and diverse manifestations of these pictures follow. This resembles a computer to me. Why? Because it was creative associatively. What does associatively and understandably mean? It means that if we enter the word cow in a computer, we get lots of videos, articles, and everything else. And what has attracted your attention is what you load, don't you? A relevant page unfolds and you read it. The same takes place in your head. The root of this tree is the inscribed word that you have written, cow, while everything else, the tree, branches, leaves, are various pictures that emerge in your head. Many people say, I don't see this, I never have it. Everyone has it. Consciousness works absolutely identically in all people. However, not everyone is given an opportunity to see it. A person should train in order to see the entire scope of information offered by consciousness. Most often, it releases illusory pictures and disperses attention. This happens when personality is a baby, let's say, and doesn't even have any self-awareness that it exists, except an obscure sensation inside. For those people, it's the most difficult. They have problems with self-observation because there is no one to observe. Such People should work very hard for personality to grow a little bit and should learn at least elementary things. However, the majority of people on this planet are capable of seeing this. They just need to calm down and look. Without doing anything at all, just to observe what is demonstrated, our consciousness always releases pictures. More rarely inscriptions. But again, an inscription is displayed as a picture. We never get a thought as a prompt or something else. After all, we don't even ponder over how words that we say are being expressed. They say it's a habit or something else. No, words are inserted. And so, when you control consciousness, it will insert proper words, certainly from the available database. If you want to extend your database, study, read more, learn, communicate, right? Otherwise, you just use what's available, but it's not that important. Again, in this three-dimensionality, everything is inserted through consciousness. It's the only way of communication, although here is also possible to contact people in a totally different way, via perception through feelings. This is felt and easily perceived. Even right now, many people are responding, right? Why is this taking place? Because the concept of space and time is tied to the material world, while what we feel is beyond it. Thus, we can easily feel any person, and we can easily feel, let's say, any point in this universe, even in three-dimensionality, I mean. It's not that important. Now, we again refer to certain, let's say, extrasensory abilities which people can also develop through their consciousness, and again, the system permits them this. When a person invests a lot of power of attention in this, and sometimes the system even grants them such abilities. Here are simple examples. If a person desires something passionately and thinks a lot about it, really thinks, and invests the power of his attention, if this is acceptable, it might happen. Again, the system weighs whether it's acceptable or not, whether a person deserves this or not, and so on.
So it won't necessarily give it to a person.
Not necessarily, for sure.
Perhaps it will take attention without even giving anything.
Of course.
Even more.
Well, how can it be otherwise? He feeds it anyway. Here, there are also certain ruses, certain laws, but this is magic. It's already real magic, meaning it's... Yet what is magic? It is utilization of your chance to gain life eternal, to become a part of the spiritual world. You use this power to get what is temporary, empty and needless. Again, empty in the sense of meaninglessness.
So basically we should address consciousness if this is needed and necessary and more...
No, consciousness has to work just as it works.
To serve.
It has to serve, it has to be always busy. This is the main and primary point. If you don't load it, it will load you. This is really so. And this has been known from time immemorial. And nowadays, many people who engage, so to say, at least in study of their consciousness, are well aware that as soon as consciousness gets freedom, for instance, a person says, "I'm tired, I'll take a rest." He starts resting and serious attacks begin. But when you keep it disciplined, when you load it with tons of various information that it has to process, better 5 to 6 tasks simultaneously or even more, that's when it is busy, it is working. Well, and again, for as long as it is working, you give it candies. When it doesn't work, you don't give. Well, it wants sweets, so what will it have to do? It will work. That's the only way to curb it. Another thing is that, you see, many people consider, if I achieve something in the spiritual, this means my consciousness will become mild, affectionate, and will obey me. It won't. It's like a bear, which we have mentioned. For as long as you invest attention in what you need, it does what you need. But if you invest in what it desires, you will be sitting and desiring what is empty.
By the way, people really have such an illusion that if you grow spiritually, consciousness must, I don't know,
By itself.
bring good thoughts perhaps in some way,
But this is
or
easy.
not tell you bad things.
What does it mean, good thoughts? Again, what are actually good thoughts? If you don't accept bad thoughts, you will have good ones in your head, right? Whereas if you accept bad thoughts, you can no longer, let's say, feel or be in contact with the spiritual world. This is actually unnatural. But when you are in perception through feelings, let's say in the dialogue with God, as they say differently in different religions, Bad thoughts cannot enter your head. Why? Because first of all, you won't admit them, and secondly, you won't finance this movie. Thus, who will film it for you? Not to mention playing it. The system is very rational and it doesn't tolerate losses. This is, like mathematics and physics, everything is in its place.
So, as soon as consciousness asks people questions and they enter into this dialogue, then
they are already in close contact with consciousness and lose, let's say, dialogue with the spiritual world in favor of the material world. No matter who would say and what, this is so. They are not alive anymore, but dead.
By the way, in many religions, it is very often said that people are called sleeping or dead. For instance, in Orthodoxy, they say sleeping ones, wake up.
Everywhere, in all religions,
Resurrect.
If you haven't resurrected during the life of your body, you will never resurrect after its death.
Is there any difference between the concept of sleeping and dead?
None.
So it's the same.
There is a proverb that a sleeping one can wake up while a dead one cannot. What is meant here is either the dead state or the state of people who almost have no chances to gain life, meaning they are so strongly controlled by consciousness or by Satan or by demons, no matter what we call them. They are under Lucifer's power to such an extent that it's impossible for them to overstep this limit. Although it's a very rare phenomenon, basically any person can, if he wants to.
Everyone can, it's just...
But not consciousness should want. If he feels, if there is such a need in him, every person feels that he is in this world for a reason. Everyone asks themselves this question, but whom do they address this question to? To their consciousness. What will consciousness answer? Why are you here in this world? In order to play mischievous tricks, leave dirt, and escape. Question, where will you escape? Nowhere. You have nowhere to escape from matter if you served it throughout your life.
You constantly reach a deadlock.
Naturally.
You understand that something is really wrong in this world. Taking even my own experience, you just understand that the stage director eventually offers you a scenario of some dramas.
Surely. What else?
And so...
Drama is the most affecting. It is well paid.
And he offers some...
Yet just look how fractally everything is projected. From people's inner state to the external to what is happening in the world. From geopolitics, geopolitics, macroeconomics, to climate. Everything is interrelated. People simply don't understand this. Meanwhile, whom does everything originate from? From them. But they try to blame others. We're actually good. Consciousness tells everyone you're good.
So, geopolitical and overall planetary processes depend on the key internal choice, whether you are with the spiritual world or with consciousness.
Well, here we take society as a unit, and much depends on it. To put it simply, if people are in reconciliation with God, they will always be in reconciliation with each other all the more, right? Because when among people there is not just a mutual interest of their consciousnesses in swindling each other, pardon me for being blunt, but perception of each other through feelings as of parts of a single whole. While the spiritual world is a whole world, it is single in multitude and multiple in unity. It's difficult to understand this with the mind, and one shouldn't understand this with the mind, with consciousness. This should be learned in practice, so if there was such a perception, people, pardon me, would never trip up each other, and would always lend each other a helping hand. If you have stumbled yourself, you won't let another person stumble over there. That's what the world would be like. Well...
Meaning other person's pain is your own pain, and the same is with joy.
When there is unity, everything is perceived as common. You see, so other person's victory is your joy and your victory. Someone else's pain is not someone else's, but yours. That's the point. This is unity. Yet again, in the spiritual world, there cannot be a notion of pain. There is happiness, there is love there. However, this may be understood only by those who achieved this. And again, if we take scriptures or something else, in all religions, there are very few of those who truly describe their experience which they had and what they exactly learned, while the majority simply copy from others. and there we can already see wandering of the mind.
A desire for special effects, such as light.
Surely, of course, and there are plenty of all sorts of descriptions that have nothing to do with reality. Those who did have experience describe everything simply. Well, a little clumsily sometimes, because it's very difficult to describe such things. We already discussed this as well. No matter how big your vocabulary is, it's extremely difficult to describe that world by means of these tools, words, and so on. It's much easier to give a person an opportunity to feel, but it's only possible when he wants this, when he is open to perceive it. Yet, if he's not open, he won't perceive. Consciousness is unable. Consciousness needs visual effects. Well, this is already violence. Whereas, what is communicated at the deep level of feelings isn't violence. It is simply love, right?
But people feel this, don't they?
They do, but not everyone understands. They try to understand it with their mind, whereas mind will tell you completely different things. For instance, many are feeling even right now, not understanding what it is, and consciousness will search for a meaning. Is it suggestion, hypnosis, or possession of some power? There is no material power here. There is simply truth. What is hidden from consciousness is just open for everyone. Therefore, those who want, or those who are able to perceive this, just get it.
Now I just want to appeal to people so that they open up.
What for? You mustn't. People have to make their choice on their own. That's how it was written and practiced from time immemorial. The spiritual world is quiet. It is quiet just because it is boundless. It's not temporary.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is such an expression that people lose consciousness of feelings and love. What is happening right now? Probably many will feel the true meaning of this expression. Yet anyway, let's try to reveal the point. What does it mean?
Well, they don't literally lose consciousness in the medical sense. It's extremely difficult to lose consciousness, in fact. I mean, to part with it. This expression means that consciousness loses power over personality. Generally speaking, I don't know which time this is, but I'll repeat again. A person should study himself. The main enemy of his life, in the literal sense of the word, the main enemy on the way to life, is his consciousness. That's why it is necessary to study it. If you don't know your enemy, you will lose. Thus, you should study how consciousness works and what it is. People have such an understanding that I'm not the one who I perceive myself as. Many people think so. And no matter what they do, no matter what they achieve, they feel that they haven't done the main thing. Yet, if they haven't done the main thing, there is no point in their life. No point at all. I would compare basically, Rumi said regarding this very well. He gave an example when a king sent a man to some city to do something, and the man came to that city and was busy with 100 different affairs. He took care of himself. His friends, companions, and relatives entrusted him with many things, and he forgot to do what the king had sent him for. In fact, no matter what he did there, if he didn't do the main thing, he didn't do anything. If a person came to this world, having come to this world, he hasn't come out of it alive. This means he has simply burned his life. That's why it is necessary to study one's own consciousness. But there is a little phenomenon here. When a person studies his consciousness, it gets horrified. Consciousness gets horrified. Whereas when personality realizes that it is personality, it experiences incredible happiness. Why does this happen? Because at these moments, each of them comes into contact with the one who created them. This is true. Studying consciousness, a person begins to understand that it doesn't depend on him, and he is its slave. And why do we see and hear so often, slave, slave, slave? A person really turns into a slave due to desires and wishes, and he is easily manipulated by his own consciousness, like a puppet. This is true. But one can learn this only after gaining freedom.
Igor Mikhailovich, I'm sure that people are now feeling what is happening. And this is really an incredible gift right now. And there is such a thing. Probably there is no their work on themselves in it now, meaning it's just an incredible gift. Yet how can they be constant in this?
Everything depends on person's choice. For instance, many people search for a strong priest, guru or mentor, no matter what we call them. They look for those who possess some spiritual power. Why? In order to sort of get nourished on this power from them, in order to gain self-confidence. All this happens, first and foremost, due to a lack of self-confidence. And why does a lack of self-confidence emerge? Who is the hindrance? Consciousness. It actually says what we have mentioned at the beginning of this program, right? That you are weak, you are incapable of anything, you will go nowhere and achieve nothing. That you engage in nonsense and that life consists exactly in matter. While you work on yourself, study consciousness, perform spiritual practices, or spend time on reading books, any books, including religious ones. While you're busy with your spiritual path, life is going by. This is consciousness, it has such a function. Yet life will go by anyway if you live as dictated by consciousness. Isn't that so?
So people have an illusion that being near those who follow the spiritual path, they grow spiritually.
This is not an illusion. This is really so. When I would call these powers spiritual powers, or whatever they are called, some people call them the powers of the Holy Spirit. Others, well, in Alatra they are called the powers of Alat. And in the past they used to be called the powers of Alat. It doesn't matter. Divine. Simply powers, spiritual powers, so to say. When a person comes into contact with the spiritual power, he gains the chance to get nourished with it. These powers fill him. That is why people are attracted to spiritually strong personalities. But again, only those are attracted who are in spiritual search, whereas in many who live by consciousness, such people provoke hatred and fury. Why does this happen? Because consciousness is afraid that personality who is controlled by it will escape its control, thanks to this influence. Therefore, consciousness tells people all sorts of nonsense. It starts throwing mud and so on, in order to distract the power of attention. And a person begins to invest those powers which he receives, let's say, additionally for his spiritual growth, for overstepping this barrier and escaping from this slavery. He starts putting them in those thoughts which consciousness palms off on him. And it turns out that, having received a chance, the person spends the funds again on serving the system, serving his consciousness.
Thus, a question arises now: where will everyone who is listening to us now spend it? How will they use it?
It is their choice, it is their right. This is exactly freedom. And just look how strikingly the spiritual world differs from the material world. In the material world, I would compare these powers to funds. It's the same as if you have been financed, you have been given a certain amount of money to build a house for poor people, orphans, and the like. But instead of this, you spend these funds on advertising the house. Understand? You haven't built a house, but you have advertised it. The same is here. You get spiritual powers in order to gain life, while consciousness turns everything around. It uses these powers to attract attention to itself, to its pictures, to some emptiness, transiency, and illusion. And naturally, a person who is unable, or rather unwilling, to go towards what he feels, really feels, although he doesn't see it with earthly eyes, while his spiritual eyes are not open yet, that's why he submits to his consciousness and wastes these powers on what he sees and hears. What happens in this case?
He only discourses about the spiritual and doesn't practice.
Philosophizes. He stands idle and philosophizes, but doesn't move anywhere. Right?
Igor Mikhailovich, there is another interesting point that the system as if locks people in fear and offers them to permanently defend some positions or some status which they have, that I follow the spiritual path or I'm good. And so people as if constantly defend the system.
They are in argument with themselves. Because again, the system, thoughts, consciousness, actually presses on egoism, while egoism is nothing but a derivative of that very consciousness, right? So it turns out that they argue with themselves. Again, what do? They invest the power of attention, or those very funds, in empty advertisement of life. Consciousness must have these fears, in fact. Consciousness must be afraid, because for it this is, well, I don't know what I would compare this to paper, for instance, and fire. The spiritual world is actually as destructive for consciousness as fire for paper. That's why it fears and doesn't understand it. But not for a human. I mean as personality.
What will you choose, to fear or to love?
This is choice. That's what will predominate in you, whether you will live in fear and suffering, if this may be called life, or you will live in joy, happiness and love, true love.
If you're with the spiritual world, everything you feel is your openness, sincerity, and love for it.
And you get the same.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the Bible there is the following expression: there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment, but he who fears has not been made perfect in love.
That's right. How can one be? The notion of perfect love, this love already relates to the spiritual world, that is, in the highest meaning of this word. But fear and the spiritual world are incompatible things. Personality cannot experience fear as such, especially when it is in contact with the spiritual world. However, fear is exactly one of the functions of consciousness, with which, like with a vivid picture, it tries to overshadow all personality's attempts to get liberated.
It's just that everyone should recognize this intimidator inside themselves and tell him that they don't need anything from him, that everything a human needs is sincere love and openness.
A human has everything he needs. He has all the opportunities. And there is personality's aspiration. Everything's available. He simply needs to take it. Just that. I will say even more, in any religion this is mentioned, and in any religion the path is indicated. Of course, there are many superficial additions made by people, who wrote, explained, and told things from the mind, but a seeker will easily find it in any religion. There are no bad religions. There is people's unwillingness to follow this path. This does exist.
Igor Mikhailovich, it seems to me that there are probably two paths. One is when, as you said, a person stands up and goes.
The path is one. Believe me, the path is one. People just approach it differently.
In other words, someone immediately...
Someone stands up and goes. But such people are very few. Those who have grasped this simplicity, while others go through thickets, through their consciousness, in the beginning through struggle, until they achieve love and understanding, and later through love. Someone has to struggle. While someone wants to live right away, he stands up and goes.
Here, every person's responsibility and choice are very important, because there is an interesting point that in religion it is suggested to clean the vessel where grace should supposedly descend. Grace that will help a person to merge with the spiritual world, that people sort of get purified.
Everybody's waiting for grace to descend. Everybody's waiting for it to come, while it is already here. You see, consciousness tells people, pray, meditate, do something else, perform some rituals. It doesn't matter. You just need to do something and wait until it comes. It won't come. For as long as you listen to consciousness and its hints, for as long as you perform spiritual practices with the mind, nothing will come to you, except an illusion or hallucinations at the best. Boasting.
Internal choice and resoluteness are important.
Honesty towards yourself, really honesty. It's not about resoluteness. Whose resoluteness? That of consciousness. What resoluteness may there be? Do you enjoy suffering? Resoluteness to suffer or to do what? Resoluteness is needed to accomplish some feat in this world. Again, what for? In order to be remembered and talked about. When a person follows the spiritual path, he doesn't care whether good or bad things are said about him. These are people's problems, subtonics. It's their consciousness.
By the way, this is probably what is suggested to many, that the spiritual path is a path of some feat.
How can this be a feat? Pardon me, you get up in the morning and wash yourself. Is this a feat? It's a natural process. The same is with the spiritual path and purification and everything else. It's a natural process. That's how it should be. Everything has simply been distorted and consciousness is telling, we again pig on consciousness. But it is really telling that you have to be strong, you have to accomplish a feat, you have to be ready for a feat, and so on. Is it really a feat? To simply start living. It's a need.
Igor Mikhailovich, for a person who has chosen to be with the spiritual world, what an ordinary day, so to say, begins with? What does his morning begins with?
Just like for everyone, with dawn.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is an expression in the Philokalia. I would like you to comment on it. As long as a man is negligent, he fears the hour of death. When, however, he comes near to God, he fears the coming of judgment. But when he proceeds in the front firmly, both kinds of fear are taken away by love.
Correct, because the first two states were from the mind, while the third state, when he's already truly with God, everything disappears. All delusions imposed by consciousness, everything that he experienced and felt, everything goes away. God is love. God is happiness. There is no fear in him or anything like that. A human cannot experience fear or anything like that before God. If he fears God, this means at that time the person is, let's say, lifeless or not awake, but definitely not alive, because only consciousness experiences fear before God.
Fear of not reaching the goal is the same thing. Now you're not him.
It's consciousness. It's all consciousness, but for as long as person listens to it, he won't come anywhere. when personality is closely connected with consciousness, is the worst fellow traveler. You see, I even don't know whom to compare it to. It's worse than Susanin. It will bring you where you definitely won't escape from.
It's simply beneficial for it if a person...
Well, we've talked a lot about this.
I've lost consciousness.
Well, not just you. Good reaction.
The whole conversation just boils down to simply saying to people, live and feel.
Why would you say this to people? Live and feel yourself, and everyone will choose what they like. Whatever they value or consider important, right? This is what their freedom is about. The freedom of choice.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is the following expression, the one believing in me, as the scripture has said, out of his belly will flow waters of living river, will flow rivers of living water.
In this case, it is exactly what we have discussed before. The one who is with him gets filled with his power, and the person radiates it to such an extent that others feel it.
And there is such a point here, so that people, well, not even people, so that there wouldn't arise such notions in one's head as to hold this somehow. One should simply be transparent, open, and entirely...
It's difficult to speak underwater, isn't it? Do your best. People are listening to you. Ask questions.
A wonderful parable has come to my mind where water is exactly mentioned. It says that in order for a ship to sail, it needs water. However, if it gets filled with water, it will just sink. So, in order for people to feel the spiritual world, they certainly need to reside in this three-dimensionality. But if they let this three-dimensionality inside themselves...
They reside here anyway, but if they let it inside themselves, they will drown. Yet this three-dimensionality, this earthly life is a chance to gain more. It's like a new stage of evolution.
The task is simply not to let it inside oneself.
The task is simply to live. Is it so complicated? To develop what you receive. Just to take it and not to waste it on empty things. That which you have now gained.
And not to look for any stages in this, because even...
Not to let consciousness discuss this. That's the main task. Not to evaluate, not to discuss. But to spend this power on what it should be spent on. If they want this. Whereas if they want other things, it's their choice. Speaking the earthly language, this is sort of a non-repayable loan. Like a lottery prize, and it's up to you where you will spend it. This is an evidence of what again? Of the fact that the spiritual world is absolutely generous. And God, He loves everyone. Right?
And people respond with this love.
People do. Well, inhuman ones, unfortunately. But it's their choice.
Igor Mikhailovich, it is indeed very difficult to describe what you feel being with the spiritual world, and frankly speaking, there is no desire to describe it. But I will now read out the words of one man
Try.
who followed the spiritual path as it seems to me. It's Archimandrite Sophrony, whose mundane name was Sergei Semyonovich Sakharov. He spoke exactly of what many people are probably experiencing right now. When this love touches the heart, our spirit sees God in the light and lives by Him and in Him. He exceeds any human thought. None of our abstract notions is applicable to Him. He is alive. His power is immeasurable. His love is inscrutable. Living with Him is an unspeakable treasure. All my words intended to express my amazement at God are totally worthless.
What can you add here?
But the program needs to be continued.
Sometimes it's difficult to make your consciousness work properly, isn't it? This is exactly what the process of service consists in, which many questioned about. It's when you want what is unspeakable, while you must act for people.
I'm collecting myself. Excuse me. I'd like to read out more of what was described by those who felt the spiritual world. The light appeared rather like fire that burned both the surface of my body and something inside the soul what I perceived upon such burning as alien to God. Oh, at that time I didn't know anything and didn't understand what was happening to me. My thought wasn't directed at exploring the nature of that fire and that light. I came alive in spirit. What I remember for sure is my major impulse to God, to my deadly longing for Him. I was expressing it in my prayer in such concentration that even if the fire or light came, my attention was not distracted from God, and my entire aspiration was towards Him.
The key point is my attention.
Was not distracted from God.
And this says it all. But this man is going himself. He not just receives, not simply receives, as we have mentioned, like alone. He was earning. He was aspiring himself, and he himself was attaining.
And what's the most valuable is that he didn't divert his attention to neither any light nor any...
Is it so difficult? It's easy. What do you need? Simply to be. Simply to open up. For a lot of people, this program will be not quite understandable.
But this is good, because consciousness won't be able to explain what is happening.
Of course it's good. I only wish it to be for the benefit.
There are actually other people who felt, and One of them was Isaac the Syrian. The Syrian. Blessed is he that is in constant intercourse with God and has withdrawn himself from worldly things, being with him only in intercourse founded upon his knowledge. Gladness in God is stronger than earthly life. He that has found it is not only free from the trial of the affections, but he doesn't even turn towards his life any longer. So a person should actually take just one step, a step from himself.
As a matter of fact, even a step isn't needed. A step means a distance, an effort. A step is in this world. While there, it's much closer.
Igor Mikhailovich, you know, while reading in various religions about these stages passed by spiritual people, there is a description of what they already feel. Moreover, it is clearly felt who actually feel, and where there is philosophy.
And where from the mind?
And from the mind, where they simply copy each other's phrases. And the stage is felt when people are working on themselves, fighting with passions. However, as for this transition, for what led to the stage when they merged with God and felt the spiritual world, here there is little information.
This is always a secret, because it's the most intimate part, which is the most difficult to describe. It's not because it is concealed from anyone or something else, no. It is subtle. It is just there. For instance, there is a person who never knew what love is, never knew what happiness is, or that there can be anything, at least anything. He simply lived by consciousness, and at one fine moment, he feels that something is different. But it is wonderful, and it's extremely difficult to describe it. He feels his consciousness is moving to the background. He feels that inside him there inflames, indeed an ardor of love in flames, which is not scorching, but deep and real. And he feels that he's now capable of everything, that he's a part of the one who is capable of everything. And so he himself is capable of everything too, just like that. As a rule, it is felt for a moment, and many search for those moments. Losing this. Why losing? Because having got delighted with this, they start looking for this happiness in the earthly world. Well, it is not here. Thus they go round in circles, standing still, no matter how paradoxical it sounds. Yet there are others, those who, having felt a little bit, never lose it anymore. They start living by this.
Generating love themselves.
Absolutely. And as you have read before, they themselves become rivers.
To be a source.
Right. That's the way it should be. This is exactly service. But not everyone wants this. Yet, if you don't want to be a source, be at least its part. This is already noble. After all, it's better to live than to vegetate. It's better to be in happiness and love rather than in troubles and fears. Right?
Igor Mikhailovich, in different religions, there is such a point at the transitional stage of working on themselves when people, in order to achieve reunion of feelings with God, assume an ascetic lifestyle and seclude themselves. And what is actually the idea of true seclusion? Meaning they physically leave, isolate themselves from each other, from neighbors.
This is already perversion of the essence. This way they try to demonstrate with mind, with consciousness, that they possess the knowledge, that they serve God, only Him, to such an extent that people make them sick and hinder them. In reality, no one hinders anyone. And if we look at the etymology and deep meaning of the Russian word ujedinение, seclusion, there is единение, a new prefix, right? What is единение? It is unity with God, of a human being with God. or personality with the soul, as it is said in Alatra, or a human being with the spiritual world, no matter what we call it. It's a fusion between the two. Correct?
And so they write that it's necessary to seclude oneself, meaning to escape from the world.
This means to merge with the divine, while to escape from the world means to escape from the power of consciousness. But this doesn't mean to run away from this world. There is no sense, you will still remain with your actors, so to say. No matter where you hide, they will be with you everywhere, if you listen to them. You cannot run away from yourself. And it won't get easier.
It's very interesting that in translation from Greek, ascesis means not isolation, but an exercise.
Of course. It's only a practice, an exercise. While we usually understand it as self-isolation, body tormenting, self-tormenting, or some, generally speaking, all this is from the mind and leads to nowhere.
So it's necessary to be simply in peace with people.
It's necessary to be simply in peace with yourself and in peace with God. Then you will be in peace with people and with everyone in the world.
That is, when you feel this fullness and holiness inside,
Of course.
everything around is holy.
Of course. Even if there is a person near you who, let's say, serves the system with his consciousness, well, it's his choice. It is he who is tormented and suffering. You can only sympathize with such person, but you shouldn't be angry with him or something else. If you get angry with him, this means you'll be as dead as he is. Right?
And you can see beauty only when you are in the light.
Beauty can be seen only by the one who has eyes, right?
Spiritual eyes.
Naturally. Well, if we speak of the real beauty,
I will now try to reproduce. Well, consciousness is totally abandoning me. Igor Mikhailovich, there is a parable when a disciple came to a teacher, to his spiritual teacher, and said, "You are famous as a person who knows everything about pearls. Could you sell or give them to me?" And the teacher said the following, "If I give this to you, you won't value it. As for selling it to you, you will lack means to buy it. Therefore, everything I can offer you is that you can dive into the sea together with me and get them."
nice parable. Thus, it is possible to share knowledge of the spiritual path, but it's impossible to just grant it to a person. He must dive together with you, if he wants to, and you cannot force him. Once again, it's the freedom of choice of the person himself. If he wants to, he dives. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't dive. If he wants to, he lives. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't live. Everything is fair.
Igor Mikhailovich, I'm sure that people will watch our programs and go back to them many, many times in order to...
Especially this one.
Yes, but there is a point here that it will surely be helpful for them, but it shouldn't become their crutch on this path, meaning...
It's easier to learn to walk with walking harnesses, especially when there is not so much time left.
This is a key point, that there is not so much time left.
Yes, life is too short.
In the Philokalia, it is said, "Do not argue with the thoughts that the enemy secretly sows in you, but by prayer to God, uproot conversation with them." This is like a confirmation of what you have said, that one shouldn't enter into conversations.
I've already said the path is one, and everyone passes it, and everyone faces the same things. For someone it's easier, for others it's more difficult, but everyone passes it. So, there is nothing new. Meanwhile, it's easy to understand who stumbled and where, how they were moving, whether their strides were quick or slow, who used crutches, as they say, and who didn't. But it's not that important. The main thing for them is to arrive, right?
This may actually be very fast, with lightning speed.
Instantaneously. Well, sometimes even a whole life isn't enough. The notion of time is important here, but not there.
Igor Mikhailovich, and what is actually
Happening right now.
What is actually happening right now? I feel what is actually happening right now.
Well, if you feel there is no need to voice it. As for everyone else, to someone consciousness will tell, while the one who doesn't pay attention to consciousness will understand anyway.
That basically such a notion.
But this only shows that not the entire meaning is in matter. This indicates that matter is just matter, but there is something greater, which is deeper, beyond its limits, and it's impossible to understand it with the mind, but it is possible to come into contact with it.
You know what's the most valuable in this moment right now? It is that
It is living.
it is living, and for the first time people have no questions now. Absolutely no questions.
No big deal. Consciousness will help them.
So it will still be erasing these moments.
And it will strongly resist this, if they allow it. But again, it's their choice. Yet only a fool pushes away the hand that has offered him water, especially when he is dying of thirst. I guess we shall leave today's meeting not completely spoken. Otherwise we would violate the laws established not by us. It's already too much as it is. All the best.